Continue with our session. Now we will have Professor Musso Stefano Francesco from Università di Genova. And also I think I forgot to introduce myself this morning when we started. So my name is Nataša Ćuković Ignjatović, as I said, with unpronounceable family name, but very simple first name. So please feel free to address me on first name basis whenever you.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Thanks for having invited me here. And now I'm going to share the screen. Can you see the presentation?
Yes.
Okay, but it's, sorry, it's at the end. It's an anticipation. So, I'm not going to show you the results of research, but I'm proposing you a reflection, critical reflection, of what reconstruction can mean, have meant in the past and can mean in the present and in the future. As I wrote in the abstract, reconstruction is not always the same thing. It can assume different meanings. It can be supported by different reasons, moved by different aims, and of course, different results. That's the reason why ICOMOS International in 2017 started a working expert group about the post-trauma reconstruction in the present days. And you can find the reports of these first results on the website of ICOMOS if you wanted to try or to see it, of course. Sorry, but I had some problem. Okay. And as always, it's always useful to start from the words, the meaning of the words that we use, and that immediately show what I said before, that reconstruction has not only one meaning. Taking into account Oxford Dictionary online, but you can use also the Cambridge one and you will find similar, very similar definitions. Reconstruction can be the process of changing or improving the condition of something or the way it works, the process of putting something back into the state it was before. And that's quite interesting for us. But it can also mean the activity of building again something that has been damaged or destroyed. That is the case of many reconstructions occurred in the past. But in the meantime, it can also mean a copy of something that no longer exists. And we will see some few examples of all these different cases. Well, I would like to start from this image because I'm sure that every one of you would say immediately, wow, this is a Sistine Chapel in the Vatican City in Rome. The marvelous masterpiece of Renaissance art in Italian history of art, with the final judgment by Michelangelo, other frescoes from other painters of the 15th century, and a great vault, again fresco decorated by Michelangelo. This one, with the creation of the word in the center. Well, if this is true, if these are images of the real Sistine Chapel, and if we go out the Sistine Chapel and go up the dome of St. Peter, we would see this panorama, the exterior of the Sistine Chapel, that, as you know, recalls the cell of the Jerusalem temple. But it was not true. Those images were not the real Sistine Chapel. And in fact, if we go out to those images, the space portrayed by those images, we would find this kind of structure. A metal provisional scaffolds covered and enclosed by black fabrics, because this is the provisional installation, an art installation performed by Gabriel Barumen, a movie director and producer, and his brother. And it's a copy, a clone, a reproduction of the real Sistine Chapel in Rome, made thanks to millions of pictures of the highest possible resolution today. It was a multisensorial replica with the smells, flavors, sounds, the bells, for example, and lighting the candles that can be experimented in the true, original, authentic, irreplaceable Sistine Chapel in Rome. The measures of this installation are exactly the measures of the interior of the Sistine Chapel. And this recalls us a very important book, The Work of Art in the Age of its Technical Reproducibility, by Walter Benjamin, of course. This is the true Sistine Chapel. It's almost impossible to distinguish the replica from the original, the true Sistine Chapel, with its vault. This is quite challenging. Of course, this is something that is very, very important. It moved a lot of ability, capabilities, competencies in a fantastic way. And it's something that can be acceptable because it offers to millions of people in Mexico City to visit in some way the Sistine Chapel, even if they don't have the resources, economic resources, the time, the possibility to go to the real one. And it exists and doesn't touch the real Sistine Chapel. So it's fantastic in some way, but it poses some questions about authenticity, for example. This is one of the most famous cases of reconstruction at the beginning of the 20th century, the reconstruction of the collapsed bell tower of the San Marco Basilica in Venice, that perhaps all of you perfectly know. But it's important because in that occasion, the architect Luca Beltrami, who was in charge of the project of reconstruction, after a strong debate in the city in which someone said, well, the bell tower of the 13th century has been lost, no reason to rebuild it. Someone said, no, it's important to have this landmark contemporary age. But Luca Beltrami at the end convinced the city that the bell tower will be or should have been rebuilt as it was and where it was. And this is a memos that still resonates in the world. This is the new bell tower because it, at any effect, is a new construction, is a new building with the same more or less materials of the past, but with some changes. For example, the introduction of a reinforced concrete structures in cell of the bells. It's a little bit different as a shape because they decided to change a little bit the dimensions. They decided it was not a matter of difficulty, technical difficulty. They deliberately choose to make some change. So at the end, the bell tower has been rebuilt where it was, this is true, but not exactly as it was. So the motto is in some way ambiguous. The recurring challenges after the great disasters, of course, made by nature or by man, still characterize our contemporary debate and pose some questions. Rebuilding for compensated damages caused by nature or by humans, rebuilding to preserve identity, but which one? Identity is a very delicate and challenging word and concept. It's a dynamic one. It's never a fixed character of the place, of the site, of the building, and neither of the people, of course. And I wanted to underline that a lot of wars have been struggled in the past to defend or to impose some identity. And identities sometimes are created also through reconstructions. But recomposition, it can be reconstruction, also the recomposition of the surviving fragments and integration of the lost and missing parts, but with what certainties, in what ways, with what forms, materials and techniques, how much, and more important, what will be at the end of the reconstruction process, the difference, that means also distance, alternative, between the lost authenticity, the true authenticity of the destroyed, damaged monument, and so lost forever, and the new one that we want to reconstruct or reproduce with the rebuilding of the lost monument. So the motto following which the lost monument must always be rebuilt as it was and where it was, as Beltrami said, yet strongly resonates in the face of painful and recurrent losses of parts of our entire architectural goods in Italy and in the world. The reasons for this motto are moral, ethical, psychological, and emotional, social or political, and also due to tourist pressure today, or before pandemic era, of course. As Renato Bonelli recognized in the face of the reconstruction of Warsaw immediately after the Second World War, overcoming its opposition to any form of mimesis, considered demeaning the fundamental need for authentic and sincere creativity as a product of the human spirit. It does not even escape the similar motivations linked to the delicate themes of individual and collective memory, lose part of their power when the reconstructions take place over a long period of time from the loss suffered. That's the case of, for example, the Cathedral in Coventry, UK. We can say that, first of all, reconstruction is not always mandatory. It can be postponed or it can be avoided. Like, for example, in the Church of Remembrance in Berlin, in the beginning of the 60s, this community decided not to rebuild the destroyed church, the damaged church, but to build a new one close to it, to give again to the community a place of worship, of faith, but not touching the ruins of the church, like to leave a sign of what happened, a memory of the terrible destruction of the war. And some years later, very far from the Second World War, the Frauenkirchen in Dresden was as well rebuilt, but with a long distance of time. That means that almost no people remember that place like a place where attended a funeral or a marriage, I don't know. So it means that the reasons for this reconstruction are perhaps different from the previous ones. Or what can we say about the Alti Pinakothek in Munich that was damaged from the bombing of the Second World War, as you can see on the picture on the left, that has been, of course, rebuilt by architect Dolgast, but not pretending to imitate the lost part of the building, but simplifying in some way, respecting its architectural syntax, but not the lexicon, the single words. Or what can we say about the reconstruction by David Chipperfield of part of the Neues Museum in Berlin, very recent, that again proposed a way to reconstruct that escape the risks of imitating the lost monument, and so avoiding also the condemnation that John Ruskin gave to those kind of interventions, because it's not possible in his consideration to make again a life the death. But the reconstruction need can derive from different reasons, as I said. For example, the cathedral in Benzone, in Friuli Venezia Giulia, that was so hugely damaged by the earthquake in 1976, has been completely rebuilt, saving and cataloging the surviving fragments of the collapsed church in view of their recomposition within a new church, because it in effect is a new church with the same forms, the most accurate reconstruction in terms of forms and shapes of the destroyed one. How much faithful, it's a matter of discussion, of course, but with a new matter in great part, even if similar to the lost one. And this is the result, very convincing. And the people strongly wanted that the church would have been reconstructed in these forms. Like to forget the terrible tragedy of the earthquake. And we now face the same problem in Norcia after the last earthquake in central Italy. This is the Basilica of San Benedict, the patron of Europe, by the way, before the earthquake and in the condition it is now. And there has been a big and huge debate about its reconstruction. And the Ministry of Culture at the end made a tender, a competition, international competition, that now is going to be realized, following the idea of the reconstruction à l'identique, like Viollet-le-Duc would have said. And what about the theater of La Fenice in Venezia, built in 1792, damaged by fire at the middle of the 19th century, rebuilt in Rococo forms in 1837, again destroyed by a fire in 1996. And then right in the night that the fire destroyed the theater, the mayor of Venice, that at that time was Massimo Cacciari, the famous Italian philosopher, who, by the way, taught aesthetic at the Faculty of Architecture in Venice, immediately said that the Venetians would have rebuilt La Fenice as it was, like it was, right? In the same way that the bell tower of San Marco, always in Venice, had been rebuilt 1 century before, more or less. And this is a result after the completion of the rebuilding works in 2006. Well, another disaster, the Cathedral of Noto, a very famous Baroque example of urban planning, but also architecture in Sicily, close to Syracuse, that suddenly one morning, again in 1996, a very annus horribilis, like Queen Elizabeth would have said, the dome collapsed due to structural weakness, bad quality of materials, but also due to some past interventions. And for example, the insertion of very rigid concrete reinforced slabs inserted between the vaults and the roofs, with the idea that in that way the water would have never entered again in the church by the roofs. But this created a domino effect. So not only the dome collapsed, but the material of the dome collapsing against these concrete slabs created the destruction, provoked the destruction of the central nave and also of the lateral nave. Again, a big debate, national and international. At the end, they decided to rebuild the cathedral in Noto like it was, as it was, and where it was, of course. But in order to achieve these results, new demolitions were necessary. So in order to have a complete rebuilding of the church, but resistant to new earthquake and fulfilling the new rules and regulations about safety, risk of fire, accessibility, etc., all the survived parts of the church after the collapse have been demolished to allow the reconstruction. This means that the new cathedral, apart the facade, is completely new. And of course, at the exterior, it's fantastic. Noto has its landmark, it's a main important monument. But in the interior, the walls are completely white. And this is a matter of debate today when the bishop wants to decorate again the interior with a modern style. Here in Nepal, it's another case very interesting because it shows that sometimes reconstruction does not answer to the real needs of the local community, but to different reasons and to external motivations and solicitations. For example, in this case of the temple, people didn't ask to have a immediately new, but similar to the old and lost one temple, because in their religion, the real holy meaning is linked to the place, not to the building. So they immediately asked to remove the ruins in order to have the chance to make again their processions, their liturgies, not exactly to have the copy of the lost monument, but to have the copy of the lost monument was very important for tourist reasons, for example. And what about the destruction of the ruins of the Roman city of Palmyra in Syria, provoked by the troops of the ISIS that demolished the arch of the entrance gate of the city? that in reality was not the Roman one, because it was the result of already of a reconstruction of the archaeologists in the previous decades. And so you can see here the picture of the gate and the absence of the gate in the reality. But then you have again the gate through a production of the arch of entrance made with 3D printing, starting from a 3D laser that has been made. The possibility to survey, as someone suggested, all the monuments at risk around the world in order to be able to rebuild them in an authentic way if a disaster occurs. All these very challenging questions has been taken into account in a recent document. This is the version of 2019, but the new version after the contributions of many other experts is going to be spread off in a few months, a revised version. But this main recommendation, number 19, will remain the same. And in this document by ICOMOS again, it said that the EU-funded projects, because that was the field in which we were asked to work, should respect EU values and the treaties, and reconstructions might only be funded in exceptional circumstances, insofar as the project complies with the selection criteria of this quality principles document. And in particular, a reconstruction should not be allowed or funded by EU if it's supported only by economic or touristic, or even worse, ideological reasons. Because the risk is to go from memory of a destroyed architecture to its apparent rebirth through a new construction, considered as one consolatory image, because this means that we are not perhaps in face of a real protection, but in front of a spectacularizing of heritage, like Marco Auger said in a very interesting book. And at the end, it would not be easy to perceive the real difference between the original, the reconstruction or reproduction of ancient and incomplete monuments in ideal and completed forms, but in different places. This, for example, is the Parthenon built in 1897 in Nashville, Tennessee, USA. Of course, the original one is not in these conditions. So it's a mix of reconstruction in the two meanings of the term that we saw in the definitions from the Oxford Dictionary. And what about the many Eiffel Towers that you can find if you go in China, for example, in Tianjin? This is a reproduction of an existing building in a different place. And also the neighborhood, to give the idea to be real in Paris. Or what about the use, very commercial, very trivial, of a very important, renowned monuments of Venice put together in different ways compared with the reality to realize a casino. And the problem is that sometimes citizens that go to the casino in Las Vegas and then go to Venice, at the end they are disappointed and prefer Las Vegas because there are no mosquitoes, no bad smells, no crowd. The water in the channel is very, very clean. The gondola is going very smooth because it's in reality it's mechanical, etc., etc. What about the comparison between virtual reality, fake reality, reality? And the maximum you can find here in Dubai, where you can find a collection of reproduction of copies more or less faithful, even merged together. You can see Eiffel Tower, the Colosseum, the Taj Mahal, etc. And the incredible thing is that this is a picture of a commercial tourism advertised that says, come in Dubai. You will find everything you would like to find. That's the problem. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Again, I have a signal here that we have some questions. Unfortunately, I cannot see them in the chat, but here with the help of my dear colleague now, it's here. From Heba and Monawi, the question is, would it be useful to have a rating system like green or LEED that is only concerned with the reconstruction of heritage buildings, that sets basic standards for preservation and reconstruction and evaluates how well the authenticity of the reconstructed building is maintained?
Sorry, but I had some problem with the audio and I can't hear very well.
The question is, do you think that it would be, I will start rephrase it, would it be good to have a rating system, something like LEED or BREEAM, specifically dedicated to the monuments of the heritage as the ones that we saw in your presentation, that will set some basic standards for preservation and reconstruction and evaluate how well the authenticity is addressed?
Yeah, the work of the working group by ICOMOS about reconstruction that I quoted at the beginning of the presentation is exactly directing in that direction. But the problem is that, and the reason why in the other document we used the word principles and not standards, is that because it's very, very difficult to have a rating system that can ensure that at the end the decision to rebuild and how to rebuild is in some way assessed on international level. Because the reasons for a reconstruction, as I tried to demonstrate, are very, very different. And so I don't know, I really don't know. I don't like very much the decision-making tools, the standardization of decision, because I think that these questions are deeply of cultural nature, and culture needs confrontation, dialoguing, elaboration of ideas, open mind, not exactly measures, parameters, standards. We can transform any problem in a sort of decision-making tool, because at the end we are going towards the artificial intelligence, the intelligent systems, the decision-making tools that could help policymakers, but I fear that the risks in this kind of process are more than the benefits that we can gain. I don't know if I answered the question.
Thank you. It was very clear, and I couldn't agree more with you. Throughout your presentation, personally, I was rethinking how much courage and sensitivity and knowledge have to be deployed in a way to find the proper solution, or something that might be a proper solution in each particular case.
You know, I don't think that this is a matter of judgment. So it's right to reconstruct in this way or in that way, or it's wrong, or it's immoral, or it's a matter of knowing exactly what happened, because I'm happy that in Venice I can find that kind of bell tower, and not a strange concrete reinforced bell tower in I don't know, Liberty style of Art Nouveau style, that was the style of that period. So if I would say it's necessary to be in the place where the disaster happens, it's important to understand all the sensitivities, the community, for example, because conservation or rebuilding is not a matter of specialists. It's not something that belongs only to architects, for example, or to experts in conservation. We don't conserve heritage because for ourselves, because heritage is not in our hands. It's in the hands of the communities, of the social community. The important is to know exactly what happened, and to know that that is not the bell tower built in 13th century, but the bell tower in the more or less the same forms built at the beginning of the 20th. Because otherwise people can be put in a very dangerous situation. As John Ruskin said, this is a fake architecture, he would say. So I think it's a very delicate question that needs to be faced with the open mind, not in a dogmatic way, not with a fundamentalistic attitude, but open to discuss and to find a solution, and then to declare exactly what happened and why. The only thing that I think is dangerous is, like in the case of the reconstruction of cathedrals in Russia, demolished by Stalin more than 1 century ago. That means that nobody can have a pain for that loss because nobody remembers the existence of those cathedrals. But now Russia is rebuilding all the destroyed churches by Stalin, of course, with the same shapes, but not with the same constructive techniques and materials. So, very challenging.
Yes, yes. And like the case with Notre Dame, that I believe that we couldn't find consensus in all architects around the world. We all take it so personal, and all have some different views on what should be done and what is there. What are those both tangible and intangible values that are to be preserved, and the ones that should be added perhaps for the future generations. So really always a very, very exciting topic. Thank you for the very nice presentation once again.
Thank you.
Okay, we don't have any more questions. So let's